All right, welcome back. We're going to switch our conversation now, talking about the Naira. That's a very heavy topic for a lot of us. Whether you use the dollar or not or travel anywhere, the effects are felt in everything. If you've gone to the markets anytime in the last couple of months, you definitely have seen the constant rise in prices of just goods and services. And, a lot of it is tied back to what's happening with our currency. I have here with me Sean Widow, who's a financial analyst. Thanks for being here today. What is going on? I woke up today and I think I saw 610 naira in the black markets or in the parallel markets, whatever I would like to call it, because there's so many, markets now for our dollar. And it's something I don't know that anybody ever really envisioned, even 2 years ago, that we're ever going to get here. And we always say that everything in Nigeria goes up but never comes down. Where are we headed? I've heard we're going to get to 1,000 probably for the end of the year. I've heard all of these stories because, we are not necessarily exporting anything. Yeah. We're not necessarily, the elections is in season, and we hear that when election is in season, circulation of money is weird and it affects everything. What's going on?
Wow, it's really a vicious cycle. And I think what we're just facing now is high demand of this forex interfacing with shrinking supply side of markets, right? So, and if you have situations like this, what you get to see is the simple major economics that when you have such high demand, the prices seems to be so to be going so high. And currently, the foreign exchange is currently having so much issues in terms of the Nigerian economy servicing so much debts. We have elections coming ahead of us. So right now, we don't even know how it will continue to be. And so if we have this demand and we don't have the supply base to match up with the demand, definitely this rate is going to get so high on a daily basis. So that's what we currently have now.
We also have a guest online, Gospel Obele, who's an economist. Thank you very much, God bless, for joining. Gospel, sorry, I beg your pardon, for joining us today. What's your take on all of this? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. We did hear the central bank governor I think about a year or two ago, talk about Aboki FX, which a lot of us thought was a weird analogy to draw, and how they were the reason for all of this going on. That's not in the conversation anymore. Now we're hearing about the war in Ukraine. We're hearing about oil prices. There's so much, confusion. Inflation rates is crazy. We're hearing also other side stories about, the constant printing of the Naira for whatever reasons. Are we going even lower in the future, you think?
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ebuka. Thank you again. It's great speaking with you again. We are really, really in a very, very tight position, quite honestly. The argument is that the Nigerian economy is recovering. I mean, from the whatever challenge we had, coming from the past, that's the pandemic and all of that. But most importantly, that recovery is coexisting with increasing cost centers. And that's where the main argument is. All right. So as we are in quote unquote seemingly having recovery, expensive recovery, inflation is increasing. And not just inflation, but the rate of that inflation is worsening. All right. So the basket of tomatoes is worsening compared to what it was, a month ago. And Nigerians need to understand that these issues are largely structural than policy driven. So even if the central bank has chosen to ban Aboki FX, a lot of its languages, from the banning of the crypto access to selling to selling FX to broad exchange operators, all of those things have showed clearly that the central bank has not been able to focus on what the major issues are, which in this case are largely structural. So, but then again, it's not the central bank's call to deal with structural issues. With structural issues, we talk about the fact that your markets are not developed. All right, we talk about the fact that we are not harnessing the potential of the non-oil space. We talk about the fact that we are not too much of a competitive nation. We don't have the infrastructure to drive national competitiveness and productivity. Until you have productivity and national competitiveness coexisting, the value of your currency cannot really, really be competitive in the long term. All right. Of course, there's also a conversation around being import dependent and Nigerians having a taste for foreign goods and all of that. All of those dynamics are weighing heavily on the demand side, all right? And if you don't have a strong, compelling supply side argument, what would happen is prices will spiral, as Shehu mentioned. And these conversations, being the fact that they're structural and we're in a pre-election year, I do not think there will be any strategic way forward, at least between now and 2023.
So I want you to help us understand, the government side of the argument, because it constantly contradicts what people are feeling on the streets. They throw out numbers about GDP growth, which you mentioned. We're out of a
Yeah.
recession. I think the IMF has reviewed upwards, the projections for 2022 to about 3 point something
Yeah.
percent. I'm not sure of the exact number now. So the economy should be doing well. They are throwing all of these
Yeah.
conversations about infrastructure being built across the country. They are working on,
Yeah.
they don't agree with the poverty numbers. So government seems
Yeah.
to say that they are doing all the right things. Why do you think it's not reflecting?
All right. Thank you very much for that question. First and foremost, we need to understand that the concept of GDP or GDP growth only talks about economic activities in the country. All right. The fact that you have high economic activities or increasing economic activities doesn't necessarily mean that your currency is better managed. It doesn't necessarily mean that the economy is much more productive. It doesn't necessarily mean that the people in that country or that space where you have increased economic activity are necessarily living better lives, or for want of what, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a form of improved standard of living. So you can have increased economic activity coexisting with increased cost of living. All right. The cost of living we're having that increased cost of living conversation because the structural dynamics that should close the gap between increasing economic activities and improved living standards are not dealt with in this case. So even if infrastructure is bad, you can still have increased economic activity. Even if, how would I put it now? Education is poor or health is poor, you can still have increased. So GDP growth rates don't really do anything in the sense. It's just how will I put it now? It's just a technical argument or a jargon, all right? It doesn't say anything when it comes to inclusivity or enabling or improving the life of the average Nigerian. The factors or the productivity drivers in this context, if you try to take a measure of those things, you realize that we failed woefully at them, all right? The fact that the average Nigerian gets poorer on a month-on-month basis is a call for worry. And until we deal with the structural issues, we are not going anywhere as a nation, no matter how high our GDP growth rate, climbs up to. So we need to come back to the key structural questions. And let me also state that the 2022 is a year of what we call political correctness, all right? Being the fact that the elections are the fore of things and all of that. And what that simply means is that the average Nigerian, in quote, politician or policy stakeholder will be looking at the economy from the lens of what the political interests are, all right, versus what the real social development interest should be. All right. So that's the argument we have now when it comes to political correctness. And it's so unfortunate that we have that interfacing with a worsening growth decline. All right. And that's really, really cause for worry for the average Nigerian. And it's really, really bad that that's the case.
All right, I'll come back to you now. Let me throw this to Sheon here, because when the APC came into power, a lot of the conversation, or the excuses they made at least, was the fact that under the PDP, especially the Jonathan administration, there was an oil boom, which they had to play with, which was why they said a lot of the successes, whatever they were, of the Jonathan administration were recorded. So for a while, we had the price of oil hovering around the $40 to $60 price point. Now we're over $100 for a stretch of time now, but things are getting worse. What is different about this time where we have these oil prices booming and we don't seem to be feeling the effects with inflation, with the way our currency is all over the place, and just the economy in general?
Well, I think that what is just happening is just a deep revelation of what we should have experienced back then. So it's more like we're just being so beclouded by the influx of the foreign exchange in the Jonathan administration. So like I will always say, structurally, we need to fix our non-oil sector. We need to harness the capacity that we have in those sectors in this current regime. Because right now, the oil foreign reserve is no longer sustainable for us as we do right now. So we need to harness the structural deficits in our current economy and ensure that those sectors are able to kind of generate forex for us, they're able to export product out. Because these businesses that we currently have in Nigeria that are currently not productive in that sense in terms of exports, they are the ones that the employees of these companies are the ones that actually suffers of this menace that we currently have now, because they are fixed income earners. So the higher the foreign exchange is going, the more it is difficult for them to actually survive. And we have in our climb, we have situations where prices of consumer goods are increasing on a daily basis because the inputs that most of those manufacturers actually requires to actually finish off their product, they are highly imported. So the cost of those products becomes so high, and you see the cost of consumer goods getting so high on a daily basis. So what I think is that this administration needs to just focus on that non-oil sector, harness the capacity, and also empower them to be able to export some of those productions out there, and that will drastically increase the influx of our foreign exchange.
So I want to get your opinion, and I'm also going to get to you, Gospel, on the same thing. Let me start with you. A lot of people have, accuse the current central bank governor of a lot of the reasons why things are the way they are.
Yeah.
How he's setting policies like Gospel had said about, whether it's focusing on the wrong things or having your hands in too many pies or banning the bureau de change, or not even necessarily trying to align both the parallel and the official market so that we have one exchange rate, which has been suggested for so long. There seems to be a lot of talk about the policies that the CBN, especially the governor of the CBN, have put out, which is what's happening to the Naira. But on the other hand, there's also the argument about all the structural things both of you are talking about, which are beyond the CBN.
Yeah.
So is it really a case of the governor making the wrong decisions? Is that really the issue?
Well,
if we change the CBN governor today and had someone who had better policies, are things going to change? If these structural issues are still there?
Well, I think it's not about the CBN governor changing some policies. It's more, it's an intertwined situation where you have all these pieces of the economy talking to each other. So the CBN governor definitely will focus on monetary and fiscal policies and also ensure that the banks are doing well and all of those things. But these policies have a way of affecting the real sector, like I call it, which are the sectors that are actually they actually pivotal to the growth of the economy. So I don't think the CBN governor changing things or making policies will, majorly affect the way we see the FX things going. We need to focus on good governance, because that's not what the CBN governor would definitely do. We need to also focus on, reducing wastage in that sense, and also, building an enabling environment for businesses to thrive. So those are the kind of things we need to look at.
Yeah.
How people can actually pay their taxes without being bothered with what's going on, how am I paying these taxes and all of those things. So it's just it's a combination of different sectors, different units of the government working hand in hand with the CBN governor and ensuring that things are in place. Same
question to you, Gospel. What are your thoughts on that? Like I said, the CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, has gotten a lot of blame for this. Some people say he's over-regulating the Naira. He's overdoing. His hands are a little too hard on trying to, have an influence on what the Naira stands for. Is it really all on him? Like I said, if he goes away today and you have someone who has all the policies that Nigerians want to have, does that change anything?
I honestly think that the central bank is overstretched. I think the central bank is focusing too much on areas and sectors and initiatives that it has the primary concern in. And that's also happening because in a sane economy, quote unquote, you should have the fiscal authorities. In this place, you talk about the federal government, the key federal government guys, and then the monetary authorities, all right, coming together to make the economy work. Now, in cases where you do not have the fiscal policies or the fiscal authorities doing their bit of the story, right, there'll be a lot more pressure on the monetary bit of things to sort of like over-regulate and, manage for the excesses of the fiscal space. And also to say that you've also seen a long track record of fiscal indiscipline, and we're not seizing the opportunities and the moments that, several times have presented to us. So in this case, the central bank has found itself diving into realms, sectors, initiatives, and policy programs that it shouldn't primarily. And as a result of things, they are exhausted and they're stressed beyond limits. Now, in the context of doing those things, you don't expect a rational institution to begin to make, in quote and unquote, rational decisions in this context, all right? That's why you see a lot of policy firefighting and some form of policies, using policies to solve structural problems. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. You need structural solutions to structural problems. Then you use policies to enable some form of sustainability around, the key results you scale from those structural fixing and all that. And also to state that there are many other leakages in this context that would enable, all right, the central bank do its work properly. You talk about the civil service, you talk about the MDAs and all of that. So technically, You need a proper functioning economy. Now, it's also important for me to say that you cannot have a proper balance between the fiscal and monetary space. All right, there will be compromises, but the compromises should be healthy enough such that the average Nigerian is at the center of that growth and developmental plan. In this case, we do not see any of that. All right, and we expect that going forward, there will be more synchronized between the fiscal and monetary policies. There will be much more responsibility for governance, and public leadership will be in view of improving human capital and productivity. Until human capital and productivity is happening in terms of the Nigerian economy powering up, and there's some form of strategic markets growth and development for competitiveness, non-oil exports and all that, there would be no fundamental and strategic growth development in Nigeria, regardless of even if the GDP growth in Nigeria hits 10%. I think we are bothered heavily on the wrong numbers for the wrong reasons. We need to be focused on the right things for the right reasons.
All right, very quickly now, I mean, we did see reports that he had bought, or people had bought the form for him to run for president under the APC, which he has not necessarily denied, but I don't know what the situation is, to be honest. But on the other hand, I mean, I think he still has about 3 years in office if he doesn't run for president, because it's sort of a fixed tenure to be CBN governor unless whatever else happens. What should Godwin Emefiele be doing going forward? What should he do differently? I mean, a lot of the things we're talking about here seem at least medium to long term. Are there any short-term conversations that we should be having now to stem what looks like a disaster waiting to happen?
Well, to be honest with you, it's going to be a disaster that would happen if things continue like this. The reason is simply because, I mean, in no rational society would you find such act, quite honestly. But then again, every individual has a right to run for president. However, that position sort of like puts him in a conflict of interest, position in the sense you are primarily responsible for the direction of spending, for the direction of price stability, for the direction of liquidity in the economy, knowing fully well that in a pre-election season, all right, monetary policies do not go in a linear form, meaning that we are going to see a lot of cash flow and a lot of spending of the dollar in the Nigerian economy. And that's because by virtue of elections, events and activities are always on the rise, all right? And liquidity will go to sectors that favor those angles. Now, the brain behind the direction of liquidity and price stability is the central bank. And the brain behind that is the central bank governor. All right, so it looks as though, that situation is a conflict of interest. And in all honesty, if you have to go by the necessary order of things, that shouldn't be happening in the first place. Now that it has happened, it's meant to step down, in such a way that individuals with proper, unbiased or objective view of doing things can step into the mix. If Nigeria continues like this, I do not think there'll be any form of progress going forward strategically for the nation.
Very quickly, Sheon, are you worried?
Well, the election is coming, and I just hope that we are able to. Leadership is one problem that we have, so I hope we're able to kind of get the right leadership, steer us in the right direction, and change the destiny of this country. So, I mean, right now, one thing that is very critical is the fact that we've not been so concrete about a particular candidate for these two major parties that we have in Nigeria. So, we are hoping that we will get them, and we hope that they have the right vision to really, really take us to the promised land and change the worsening situations we have right now.
Sheon Idowu, Gospel Obele, thank you very much for joining us. We're all keeping our fingers crossed, because whether you spend the dollar or not, everybody's feeling the effects of what's happening with the Naira. Thanks for being here today. We'll take another break and be right back. Please stay with us. Say, hey, hey, hey.